we talk about education and we talk about it through the lens of K through 12 or pre-K through college. Oftentimes, though, we forget about adults, those grown folks who are out there navigating the world and what kind of education they need. And this is not distinctly about higher education. It is just about being a functioning adult in the world. So our education system has been dealt numerous blows over the course of time, and we're seeing that certainly, unfortunately, continue today. And it's not just affecting younger people, it is affecting what I call those grown folks. Let's check out this headline: a fifth of American adults struggle to read. Why are we falling or failing to teach them? The nation's approach to adult education has so far neglected to connect the millions of people struggling to read with the programs set up to help them. So it doesn't matter necessarily if those programs exist if people can't get to those programs. So we need to get to the heart of why that is happening. And yeah, this is right. You read that right, you heard that right. We have a fifth of American adults who struggle in that way. And so here's one's destiny is uniquely entrenched through nationwide graduation rates have risen in recent decades. The number of adults who struggle to read remains stubbornly high, 48 million or 23%. And this data is coming from ProPublica. And how and why is this happening? Let's take a little deeper dive. Nearly 60 years ago, the federal government established funding to provide free education for adults who could not read to help them improve their literacy and obtain employment. Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Baines Johnson recognized how low literacy intertwined with poverty and all the ills that came with it. ProPublica found access to this instruction is limited, increasingly inefficient, and much like the nation's school systems, highly dependent on geography and the political will of elected officials. And you know when we got to deal with just purely political will, we are in trouble right there. Now, this is a good point in this segment to remind you that Congress just passed a record-breaking $858 billion. That is $1 billion with a B, underline it, underscore, exclamation point, message in a bottle, $858 billion defense budget without a problem, giving the president of the United States about $45 billion more than what was asked for, but additional funding for education, that's unrealistic. Wise?
Man, this is really heartbreaking stuff, to be honest, because it's a bit of a double failure. Obviously, these adults fell through the cracks when they were children, where we failed them, and then they get to adulthood and we don't provide them with the resources to help themselves. And I don't think a lot of people understand what it feels like to feel helpless and hopeless in a situation, especially when it comes to something like education. A lot of times people feel like it's over, and there's no way to recover from this. And especially when, society is just beating them up, generally speaking. And then, on the other side of this, Nina, as you well know, we talk about issues of homeless and crime and those type of things. Where do people think these things stem from? We let these folks fall through the cracks at every single turn, and then they turn to these alternate lifestyles, whether it be homelessness, whether it be, committing chronic crimes. Like this is where this stuff starts. And so this is the most heartbreaking part, where, the richest country ever known to man, we can't put in some systems that help people learn how to read. Like, it feels like the most fundamental thing that we should be doing as a quote unquote advanced society, and yet we're failing so many people.
Yeah, it's basic. I mean, this is not even getting to, we're not even talking about even a 2-year college degree or 4-year degree, and less known advanced degrees. We're just talking about the basic reading levels to be able to thrive in society, and we are failing. And let's continue on. The adult education system began to morph into what is now effectively a credentialing program largely aimed at pumping out students with high school equivalency or workforce certificates. As federal funding stagnated, states were called on to put up more money or risk atrophying their programs. National enrollment has careened down to only 700,000 students last year, despite the country's immense need. Less than 3% of eligible adults receive services. So thank ProPublica for their research. It just further lets us know that adults in this society are suffering when it comes to literacy. The programs that are available are not penetrating enough. And in some cases, some adults could be very embarrassed that even at that particular stage in their lives, that they are enduring this. And Waz, you made a very good point about somehow they were failed along the way, even as children. And that is something that as a society, and because you have two presidents, both President Kennedy and President Johnson, who saw this even in the 60s. And here we are with more information, more access to that information. The World Wide Web did not exist, in the 60s. We have more access to information than any other time in human history, yet we are failing each other on that point. But there is a sliver of hope, and that is in the city of Detroit. Mayor Mike Duggan of Detroit was watching this pattern play out at scale when he was elected in 2013. The city was bankrupt and nearly 1 in 5 adults were unemployed. Adults struggled to read, so many of them, generation after generation, that the city had grown to epitomize the nation's literacy crisis. Duggan and other city officials came up with an unprecedented plan, one that accounted for the city's responsibility in creating the crisis. They launched Skills for Life last year. Unlike most municipal job programs, it pays participants to go to school. So Waz, how creative is that? And also for the mayor to look at this situation, not as a failing of the individual, but a failing of society, and that collectively society must try to ameliorate this problem. Very good on his part.
Yeah, it just feels like one of those things that you got to care about. There's certain things that, in our society can feel like really hard and complicated to work out. Take like, how we manage our energy, for instance. Like that seems like, there's all these interests, there's all this other stuff in the way. It's gonna be hard to get our energy situation in a pattern that is sustainable for the future. Literacy is just, guys gotta care. And I know we gotta move on, but I just wanna leave people with one, sort of thought is, it's like my parents are from Haiti, I've been to Haiti, and they're not from the city, they're from the countryside. And in the Haitian countryside, in the mountains, which is essentially the countryside of the countryside, you will find people who can read and do basic arithmetic, right? And that's in one of the poorest countries on our side of the globe. So if like they could do that in the damn countryside of Haiti, we can figure out how to get people to read in Detroit, I think.
True that, in Detroit and all over the country. So this is a communal problem and it deserves a communal fix.